for most of your projects. Like most of any of the companies nowadays, like when they talk about the wireless, they really consider one of the option as a Zigbee also an option. And Zigbee, it actually, the another advantage is it is more flexible when integrating with any of the devices, and it goes with one of the standard as 2.4 gigahertz. As I was telling you, the original version supports up to only the 900 megahertz. And then Zigbee Pro, the next version, what they came up with the 2007 or 2008, it supports on 2.4 gigahertz, where you have the more range, more devices communication, and it supports IEEE 802.15.4. And there is about like 5,500 plus companies right now, members, like a lot of known companies like maybe Amazon, Comcast. There is lot many companies which they do products on Zigbee. It becomes more like a standard on wireless in most of the regions around. And advantages, it is low power. Even a battery operated device can last for a years. Like so, that is actually the great advantage on Zigbee, right? So this is actually the generic history about Zigbee. What is it is with the Control4, right? So before I just go into in deep, Zigbee works on a mesh communication, which means it really don't have to be a point device, right? Whatever the devices which can act as a repeater that can pass the information between the devices, right? And most of your Zigbee works like a mesh communication. Even the fail nodes happens, it actually continuously connects to the other nodes, whatever it can actually connect it. So that's how it works, right? So on Control4, we call it as a Zigbee Pro because we adopted Zigbee Pro in 2007. So when they had, and even previously with 2003 itself, we also had a Zigbee products. When they actually come up with the 2007 version, we just did a firmware update on the devices, which means we were like pretty much sure on our devices which are going to actually update the future updates of the Zigbee also. And even nowadays, Zigbee is working on the next standard version, which is Zigbee Pro, I think 3.0. We should be supporting that as well. That is what the confirmation around. So how it is special with Control4? So that is what the more history here. So how does it differ from a normal Zigbee, from a Control4 Zigbee? It is like we call it as our original special sauce. Sauce in the sense it is not actually the original, a different sauce. We have our own encryption layer on a Zigbee. So that is what it makes it as a Control4 Zigbee. And we don't allow all the open Zigbee products to integrate with Control4. So what are the Zigbee products which wanted to be integrated with Control4? Definitely it has to undergo a license and an encryption key on top of it. So we'll have our own encryption layer for Control4 communication. So it ensures more security and it avoids a lot of confusions. Whatever the products I wanted to integrate, it is not that I wanted to integrate anything into anywhere. So it just holds something where it gives you more secure connections. So that is what it's all about, right? In Control4, all my controllers actually can act as a mesh controller in the sense where a device will have a Zigbee server and also will have a Zigbee access point. So that is actually referred as a mesh controller in Control4 environment. So all my controllers supports this. Like we have 5 ranges of controller, and except the 5th range, which is we call it as a CA10. So all the 4 ranges of the controller support Zigbee, so which is mesh controller, which can act as a mesh controller. Right. So by default, what happens is all my controllers will have the mesh controller built in, but it will be not enabled. So you need to enable it. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And when it comes to nodes in Zigbee, so we have something called active nodes and passive nodes, or maybe call it as a router nodes, or maybe call it as a N nodes. Router nodes is nothing but a device which operates on AC power or DC power, where it always be powered. And N nodes is actually the device which operates on battery. So N nodes will not actually help you create a mesh network, but your router node will help you create a mesh network where it will pass, receive, send the information front and forth. But your N device will act just like a remote, or maybe a remote, or maybe a wireless battery operated sensors. All those devices we will call it as a N nodes in general. An example for a router node. So in Control4, we have a wireless lighting devices like my lighting dimmer or a keypad or a Z2 IO module. So all these devices will actually act as a repeating nodes or routing nodes where it can pass the information front and forth. And devices which is like remote or maybe a thermostat or maybe a wireless motion sensor. So this Zigbee devices will be acting as a end device. It will not actually help you create the mesh network in general. Right? And node and mesh relationship, how does it work? So you will have a server, and server can parent up to certain nodes, whatever the nodes which is nearby. And then of course, after that, your devices will be keep on connecting with the whatever the active nodes which can be nearby devices. So that is how your nodes and the devices relationship works. And in Control4 Zigbee, what happens is in case if any device fails, so all my devices will keep on polling for the right and the nearby devices. So it will actually auto connect it to the possible available nodes nearby. And also in case if you are replacing the device or changing the device and identifying it back to the project, it should identify back to the nearby devices back. So that is what that is how it works, our node and the devices relationship. Right, and this mesh technology we call it as a honeycomb mesh technology. So that is where the Zigbee name itself derived from, the honeycomb Zigbee. So that is the same technology which is actually followed in any of the Zigbee network in general. And next thing is, as I told you, so all my controllers have the Zigbee capability inside it. And if you need it, you need to enable it from your software. So then only you'll actually get it enabled. Right. So once I can enable it, so then of course I can add and identify all my Zigbee devices to the project. Right. So whenever you identify it, what we normally do is we'll identify with a MAC address of each and every devices. Most of our Zigbee devices can be identified just by pressing the tapping the buttons. So once you are tapping the button, it will actually get encrypted and it will get locked to the particular Zigbee mesh net controller. So that it ensures the security. So once the encryption is done, so it'll actually ensure the key. So which means your Zigbee is connected, and also it is not communicating between the other Zigbee devices nearby, or maybe if I have another mesh controller. So to avoid all those kind of issues, we actually encrypt it. We actually lock it with the MAC address of each and every devices. Right, and when you are identifying the devices, we always recommend you just first itself you identify what is your nearby devices, then you can just keep on going in, so that when you're doing itself, it will actually identify it to the right node. And even if you are starting it from the other end, what will happen is definitely you will not have the enough range. So you will see your Zigbee range is very much lower. And then of course you will not be able to connect it all the way. So the best way is to identify the nearby devices, then keep on adding to the next level of devices. So that will give you more easy option. So you are ensuring that all your Zigbee devices are identified in your any of the projects. Right, in Control4, so almost to identify any of the Zigbee devices, normally we'll have that 4 tap as a pressing option. So you need to press it 4 times. Maybe if it is a keypad or a dimmers or the lighting devices, or maybe a Control4 SR260 remote, or maybe a thermostat. So all those devices can be identified. It's all Zigbee devices anyway. So you just need a 4 tap on the device. Right. So this is actually a basics of Zigbee. How does a Zigbee works in Control4 environment? So anyways, all the controllers will be referred as a mesh controller. If you wanted to identify any Zigbee devices, you need to enable the mesh controller, which means Zigbee server and the ZAP. Then you can identify all your Zigbee devices to the project. So that is what the basic is. Once you identify it, the next thing what will happen is your controller will take responsibility of updating all your Zigbee devices, which means firmware update, signal range. So everything can be monitored from your composer, which means your software, and it will give you the entire view. What is the MAC address? What is the Zigbee range? What is the routing? So every capability can be monitored from the Control4 composer, which means the software tool for a dealer. Now the next thing is uh, designing principles. Okay, so I know now Zigbee can work in Control4, but what is the designing principles? So how does it works, right? So what are the issues I can avoid if I'm using it in right way? So that is what we are going to talk about in the designing the principles. In designing the Zigbee principles, the point number 1. So for example, if I'm having issues with my SR260 remote, so which means it is keep on connecting it, it'll always reconnecting it. Or maybe if my keypad, if I double tap, triple tap, then only that particular keypad gets identified, or some certain actions happens. This is not only with Control4 Zigbee environment, it can be with any Zigbee environment. So you'll always have this kind of issues. Like when it comes to wireless, the first thing your customer will ask you is, what is the latency? How does it work, right? So if you design it perfectly, if you design and plan it perfectly, so you will avoid a lot of the issues, and you will always feel wireless is way better than my wired in some cases, not all the cases I'm talking about, right? So when I have the project which can be done with wireless, but my customer says that wireless may not be the right option. In that kind of case, you will have, so but plan it initially, so you can see this kind of issues maybe in your any of your projects. My remote is not communicating properly, or my locks are like, yeah, I have the Zigbee lock, but it is not like able to open it from my app. I have a lot of issues doing it. So, or maybe if I have a Zigbee curtain module which is integrated, it is not actually working properly, or maybe my thermostat does not work properly. So all those devices, all those issues can happen if you does not plan your Zigbee correctly. So this will be like for any, right? So we are going to talk about Zigbee mesh design principle, how what is the right way, what is the best way to do it. And this design principle is based on our experience, and also we don't restrict anyone to doing it from certain aspects from the principles, but this is actually the best practice what we actually do it or recommend most of our dealers, right? So that is what we are actually going to talk about here, right? Right. The first thing is enabling a wireless in your rack. Okay, so that will be never be a right option. So metal cannot actually be a good device to pass through your signals. And moreover, any of your projects, what you will normally do, your rack will be in like a basement or maybe in a closed environment, right? So you will definitely not have enough range to connect it to your first node itself. Okay, so then that is actually a big problem. So we always say don't enable Zigbee in a rack unless it is a open rack where it can access to the devices, or maybe you are placing it near to the rack, or maybe if you are using an extender antenna kit or something. So unless you do it, don't enable Zigbee in a rack. So that is actually the principle number one. So that is what the Control4 recommendation what we do. And then principle number two, in that kind of cases, if it is a huge project, so you'll have multiple numbers of controllers, you can use a secondary controller as a Zigbee mesh controller where it can help you create your own its own network. And communication between your slave controller and the master controller will always happen via IP. So you'll not have seen much latency unless it is 50 milliseconds. So that's what the recommendation. That's what the saying is. Okay, so you will have a seamless integration and you will have seamless connectivity with all your Zigbee devices. So that is actually the another recommendation, right? And then the third thing is principle number three, and place it at the central location, right? If I am doing a small home, so I'll have only one controller which will be sitting in my living room. So that is well enough to connect it to all my Zigbee devices. So don't put in somewhere in a corner and try to connect it with entire network. So that will actually create a lot of mesh, because each and every nodes need a time. So approximately you should consider about 550 millisecond between the node communication. So even if I say zero latency, it will not be virtually it is a zero latency. It is still will be a million seconds latency. So right. So each and every node communication will have a 50 milliseconds latency, right? So you need to create. You should not have more mesh, which means more nodes connecting it, but your device will keep on connecting it as long as it gets the range, but the communication between your device to the end device, so that is what the difference is, right? So we always recommend put it in the centralized accessible location. And then this is actually the another thing, uh, principle number 4, right? So your wireless, your access points also works on 2.4 gigahertz, and also your controller Zigbee works on 2.4 gigahertz. This can create a lot of issues in your project, like I'm not getting enough range of my wireless signal, or maybe my Wi-Fi phone device is not enough getting range, or maybe my controller does not get enough range, or my remote does not work properly, my keypad does not. So this kind of issues might happen. So better to avoid it. So you should have a distance between your wireless access point and to the mesh controller is minimum 5 meters. Okay, and in cases actually even I have seen in 1 meters also it works, but the practical experience what we recommend is 5 meters, right? So your wireless access point between your mesh controller. So that is actually the another recommendation which is called as principle number 4. And some of our controllers can also have wireless and Zigbee capability, right? So if I don't have if I'm not able to pull a cable to the controller, what we say is you put your controller on wireless. It can work on your wireless also. So then it becomes very much easy, right? So I can put it in wireless, I can put controller anywhere, right? So, but if you are putting your controller on wireless, don't enable Zigbee on the controller, which technically it means both are nearby, right? So your wireless access point, which means wireless connection and also the Zigbee mesh connection. So it should not be nearby. So as a technical recommendation, what we said, it should be 5 meters, right? So that's where the another issue is. So you should actually always place it at the any one of the option, right? So don't enable both in the single controller. And the principle number 5, okay, so this must be a surprise. Okay, so we always recommend don't put more than 70 devices per Zigbee server. You can have multiple Zigbee server in a project, which means I can have multiple controllers, I can put them as a Zigbee controller, mesh controller, and I can add more number of devices. As a practical recommendation, we say 70 devices per controller, and these 70 devices, also you should consider that whether you have enough Zigbee coverage around. So whether you have the, like whether I have the, for example, if I'm doing in a passage on the bedrooms, I'll have like a thick wall, right? So I should have definitely your Zigbee, any of the wireless signal will not go through your wall, right? So you should have a device at the entrance and also at the front near to the door. So you should plan it very much accordingly when you're planning it any of the Zigbee devices. And again, we are not limiting the 70 as the number. I still have a project which is running about 150 DB devices in a project, but latency and also considering accessing between the devices, this will be creating a lot of issues. So we always say don't put more than 70 devices per controller. Per mesh controller. Right. So what happens if I have more than 70 devices? The next option is definitely adding another slave controllers. Maybe if I'm running a EA1, I need to add another CA1 or maybe any of the small, maybe another EA1 project and make it as a slave, and I'll just make that as a mesh controller. So that is what the option is. So and each and every Zigbee mesh controller will have their own channel number. Most of the times when you create itself, it will adapt to the right channel which can merge with the which can actually go with the environment by itself. In case if it is actually configuring you are in the same Zigbee channel, you can actually change the Zigbee channel also. Okay, so we'll give you that flexibility as well. So each will have their own identification, which means whenever I identify it, I can identify to the right Zigbee server, and it locks with the MAC address to that particular server. So this becomes more secure. So it will not actually have any issues interfering with each other as well. That's what the Zigbee design principle all about. So this is actually the 5 major principle what we always say. So if you follow this, your Zigbee can be most loved system in any of your projects, right? So the principle number 1, so don't put your mesh controller in a rack, and use secondary controller as a mesh controller. And the next thing is put it at the centralized location. And also the 4th principle is have the distance between your wireless access point and the mesh controller. And the last one is limit your mesh controller to 70 devices per server, right? So don't
Question here, 70 is per server only. That means you can add one more server and make other additional 70 devices as well.
No audio.
definitely you can add a slave controllers. For example, if I have a EA1, I can add a CA1 or another CA1 into the same project. So that will become a secondary server. So you can add like 70 plus 70 becomes 140. So you can add more number of servers or the controllers. If you hack it, it becomes a server. So that's what it is.
Few people are saying no audio. I think we are audible. Please text it in the chat. As of now, I can hear everything.
Any limitation to the servers?
There is no limitation as such. As a practical, we have tested about 38 servers in a project with no latency, and also So that is what actually the practical practically we have tested. That is what the site biggest one we till now we have tested, which is 48 server.
How many nodes are there?
48
70.
48 servers into 70 nodes. That is actually full capacity we have tested.
I just have a question. When you talk about 38 servers, do you mean 38 expanders? मतलब range
38
expanders, range
controllers.
booster.
38 controllers.
So
38 controllers.
Server is a controller and repeater is a different thing. Yes. Extender is a different thing.
So does my repeater, and if I'm using a processor or a repeater, it does one and the same job, like it's different?
No. Repeater will just boost the signal.
Okay.
Your server will host the signals, which means host the nodes.
Basically, in a nutshell, if you really explain, server is nothing but like a router which will communicate with all your devices. Repeater is nothing but an access point which will enhance the signal level. That's it. So a server can communicate to 70 devices. Within that, a repeater can enhance and take the signal to the farther location. So you can have 38 servers in a project into 70 devices is the capacity of the system what we are talking about.
Okay, and all those servers are accessing through IP, right? They're interconnected through IP.
Servers accessing through IP.
Exactly. So server is technically nothing mean as a controller, right? So it's all IP based.
It's all IP based. So all 38 were connected through IP cable.
Through the network, yes.
Connected. Yeah, through the network cable. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. So next comes to your channel analyzing. So how does your wireless, which means IP and your Zigbee relates each other, right? So we talked about the not putting the devices which need to be nearby, right? So just for example, so I have a that is not actually a signal break, that is actually a signal video which is running. Okay, right. So my audio is still clear only. Right. So you have a channel for each and every devices, right? So I can actually set it into the channel. So in Control4, we work on 15 channel analyzing. So which means like from 11 to 25. And in this 11 to 25, we say 15, 20, and 20 is actually interference free channels. Why we call it as a interference free channels? We will just know in a minute, right? So in most of our home environments, we will handle in multiple frequencies like 900 range, 800 to 900 range is your Z wave. And then comes your IP, which is in 2.4 to 2.5 range. And then of course Zigbee and wireless IP, which works on 2.4 gigahertz. And then of course the 5 gigahertz on top of it your Wi-Fi. So right now we have all our access points on 2.4 and 5. So that is this is where your analyzation comes in. So your 2.4 gigahertz, your wireless, which means IP, works on channel number 1 to 11, and your Zigbee works on channel number 11 to 25. But how does it interference each other, right? So if you go in deeper, right? So you have your in your IP, you will always call it as channel number 1, 6, and 11 is actually interference free channel, because that is the channel which does not interfere with the channel. Maybe if I take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 can actually relate with 1. So that is why they name it as a 1, 6, and 11 is actually in IP interference free channels. So if you put your wireless access point in auto, most of your access point will take channel number 1, 6, and 11. So it does not take much more, right? So most of the times if I put it in auto, that is actually the channel number it will actually take, unless it finds some interference, right? And now on top of it, I'm actually putting in my Zigbee, my channel interference, right? So my channel interference on Zigbee in wireless environment is like if I enable channel number 11, so that is actually the same frequencies what my wireless access point and also my Zigbee works in. So right now I have plotted all my 11 to 25 in here. So from here only, so this I can easily figure out what is my Zigbee interference free channel numbers, which means channel number 15 and channel number 20 and channel number 25, we always call it as a interference free channel. And in some case, what we say is 25 is actually will not have the same range and the same capacity of what your other channel can do. So that is why we say 25 is bit shorter. Actually, it will have bit lesser range, and also the node capacity is bit lesser than all the other nodes, right? So but 25 is actually interference free channel for any of the case, right? So I can put it in 25, it can work in, but if I have the enough length and less number of devices. But other than that, 15 and 20 is actually the interference free channels, right? And maybe in your project, if your wireless is configured in maybe 6, better to avoid that channel. So which means from 15 to 20 you avoid it, so configure other Zigbee channels. But this all can happen by itself, which means whenever I enable Zigbee in my controller will read the current environment, what is the interference channel around, and it will actually auto adjust by itself. But in some cases, maybe once I done, the next time there is a next to guy next to me, he'll have the access point. It is with the same channel which gets interfering. So then definitely you need to log in and change. But 99% of the case, you really don't have to worry about these channel numbers because it actually auto adjust by the site environment by itself. The controller will actually read the environment, right? Okay, so to go further deeper, so I have a wireless access point which is configured in channel number 11. So for me in that home, except that range from 21 to 24, all my wireless, which means Zigbee channels, which means 11 till 20, and then of course 25 is my interference free channels for the project. So that is how your wireless and Zigbee works in. Right. So that is actually the details about the interferences between your Zigbee and your wireless. And I'm going further. Okay. And in a project, if I have multiple mesh controllers, maybe if I have multiple Zigbee controllers where I'm adding more number of devices, maybe if I'm adding 140 devices or 210 devices, I'll have multiple controllers. I'll segregate it to a separate mesh controller. We always recommend put each and every mesh controller in a separate channel numbers so that I am not giving a chance, even by mistake also, even my director or maybe my programming bug also should not actually interfere with any of the other channels, right? So that is actually the another recommendation what we always normally do, right? And the next thing is the distance, right? So we always have a mesh communication. So mesh communication distance, so this is actually again a practical distance limitation. It is not actually the actual distance limitation because we have in open area, we have actually run about in an open environment, we have actually run about uh, 50 meters with no issues. But as a recommendation, so what we actually normally say is you should have a repeater, you should have a repeating routing nodes between 10 meters. So that is what the device limitation, not limitation in general. So that is what the recommendation is. So distance between two nodes is 10 meters. So you can have multiple nodes, but you always ensure that 10 meters actually the identical distance, right? Which means 30 feet. So as long as you have multiple barriers, like maybe a POP wall or maybe a concrete wall, maybe a pillar or maybe a brick wall. So all these devices will definitely reduce your distance, maybe a glass. Okay. So technically what happens is when I say glass, always say glass can actually pass through the signals. But in our home, we will not just put a glass, right? So we'll always have a UV coating on it and you will have multiple layers of the glass. So that will actually cause a problem, right? So definitely it won't actually pass through your concrete walls. So maybe if I'm doing a concrete wall or something, so you will not have you will have definitely have issues, right? So this is what the distance limitations. So by default, so which means 10 meters is identical distance between the nodes, and you can keep on adding the distance, right? And the next thing is, before I go into the killers, right? So in Control4, we have a dimmer, keypads, and also something called Zigbee to I/O. So dimmers and keypads will actually parent up to 16 nodes, which means it can directly talk to 16 nodes. And also my controller can talk to 32 nodes, which means controller can parent up to 32 direct devices, which means it can directly talk to the nearby devices, which means 32 devices. And my Z2IO, Zigbee to IO module, which is actually called as a repeater device. So that can actually parent up to 32 nodes. Okay, so that is actually the noding capability of the device. A single device can talk to how many nodes or a single device, but you can have multiple repeaters. So repeating to repeater, repeater to repeater, we don't have actually a technical limitation of the repeaters, but definitely, so when you have more number of repeating nodes or the routing nodes, definitely you will see a latency, right? So which means when a first device to end device, if you go beyond a 10 device, which means a 10 repeating nodes, then definitely you will see a latency in any of the Zigbee, any of the wireless devices. That's how it normally works. right? So that is actually a node capability, and that is what the limitation of the repeating nodes. That is what the device is, how it actually operates. And the next thing is, some of this is actually called as Zigbee killers. It is not only Zigbee, so any of the wireless signals, you will always face some issues. Some when you want anything which operates on 2.4 gigahertz, maybe your Wi-Fi or any of these things, right? And if I have a refrigerator or maybe a microwave oven or maybe a water heater, so all these devices when it is operating, so this also actually eliminates actually interference which is of 2.4 gigahertz. Technically, it should not be done, but most of the manufacturers still they have this. When you go near to the device and you operate your mobile phone, you can actually see it, right? The Zigbee killers. So any devices which operates or emits the 2.4 frequency, which is of the same Zigbee, so definitely you will have Zigbee issues, right? Maybe your water tank, which is UV coated or anything, so definitely you will have the signal reflection there. So you will not have the enough coverage from there as well. Or maybe a cordless phones which operates on 2 frequency, or maybe an access point which works on 2.4 frequency. So definitely you will have the interference in any of the case. Right? So that is what the Zigbee killer is all about. All right. So I'm just taking an example. If I have a project which is more than 90 devices, but I wanted to control all those devices, definitely if you have the controller which is identified, it will work. But to avoid those latency issues and other things, so you should consider adding a slave, which means a secondary controller, and make that as a secondary mesh controller. So that will actually handle another 70 devices. So right now it becomes more like all of them handling 70 cases, right? And before I conclude about the Zigbee, uh, maybe if I'm doing apartment projects, multiple apartment projects with the same project, because if I say apartment, so that is where it becomes like identical solution. Like if I do a 200 apartments or 500 apartments, all my 500 apartments will have the same requirement, right? So I'll have maybe a few lighting circuits, blinds, because if it is apartment, so they'll give basic integration, right? So in that case, what happens is, so you will do a project and then you will try to copy the same project and load it into the other controller. Okay. So what we normally say is, don't identify all your Zigbee devices and load it into the other controller. Okay. So if you identify devices in controller A and load the same project in controller B, what will actually happen is, even if you remove and re-enable the Zigbee, so that is also will take the same channel number. So there can be a chances that this both can actually get interfered, since because of the MAC ID which may get logged in, or maybe the MAC ID which was previously taking it as a cache, so that can cause some problem. So before you identify any of your IP and Zigbee devices, best way, create a project in virtual, back up the project, then load the project one by one into each and every site. So that becomes more easy. So don't just, once you done the entire project in your network and identified it, then don't actually copy paste, which means backup and load the same project and recreate, which means re-identify there. So that will create issue, right? So that we normally say avoid it. So in this kind of cases, so definitely creating a control project will not take more than 20 minutes, even if you are creating a new project also for that kind of cases. But avoid copying the project after identified all your devices and loading into the other controller, right? So that is actually the basics and the design principles of uh, Zigbee, right? Uh, so I'm just moving towards a lighting solution. So why we talked about Zigbee before talking about the lighting solution? Because I can take the lighting solution itself as a separate session, right? But why we did this is, we have a lighting solution which works on Zigbee, and it was very popular. Most of our dealers using it, so it was widely used, and this becomes most popular as a retrofit solution for lighting, right? So with fewer modifications, we can actually put as any home into a smart lighting devices home, right? So that is the reason. So we have a devices on Zigbee. So before we talk about the devices on Zigbee, it is better to talk about the technology, right? So that is what that is why we had the Zigbee on first half, and then of course the second half will be on the lighting products, right? So I'm jumping into the lighting solutions, right? So before we go much deeper into the lighting solution, definitely we talked about few things earlier, right? So the load types and other things and all we talked about in the basic session, which is the session number 2. What are the types you normally use in your projects and what is the options we have and how do you control it? We talked about most of the things with bit extensively previously, so I'm not going into much deeper now. So right now, almost most of your lighting devices, most of your lighting projects, you will be mainly dealing with LEDs. Okay, so LED itself nowadays will have various options. So the best thing what we say about the LEDs in any of the projects, which mean the lighting devices, lighting solutions in any of the projects, we always say test your lighting loads, even if it from the same manufacturer, same spec, get some bunch of loads and test and then confirm it to your customer. Lighting is most critical thing. So if they don't have the better experience, definitely your project will never get succeed. So we always say check all your lightings. Why we say is your LEDs nowadays it just comes with 1 watt 2 watt LED. So if I'm getting a 1 watt 2 watt LEDs, how will be my dimming range, right? So that is also will get more impact. So most of your LEDs does not actually will have a 0 to 100, right? So some LEDs will start from 10, which means the dimming range from 10% to 90%, or maybe 10% to 60%, or 20% to 80%. Then after that, it will just go to 100, because mainly because it is not because of the dimmer, it is because of the LED by itself, right? So what is the dimming range it is actually meant for, right? So that is where you will have a lot of issues. So that is the reason we always say test all your lighting devices and then you add it into the projects, right? And then definitely we talked about the dimming technologies also. What are the wide options for my dimming technologies? So to start with, first one we talked about is actually the phase cut dimming. So where you normally control the phase which actually goes to the load, right? Right. And the next thing is, so phase cut dimming is nothing but the phase load what is actually going. So whenever I control that, that actually gets impact. So whether it is a forward or the reverse phase, there are multiple phase technologies we talked about and directly controlling it. And the next thing is control signal dimmings. To start with control signal dimmings, we talked about 0 to 10 volt, the first one. So when it talks about control signal dimming, so you will not directly control the load, which means the bulbs. You will control a in-between device, right? We call it as a drivers or maybe a ballast or any of those devices. You will have additional 2 wires, which means like analog or digital or any of the dimming options, definitely, right? So we will have a ballast or the driver. You will actually control that ballast or the driver. You will directly not control the load, right? So your, which means if it is analog ballast, what we say is 0 to 10 volt ballast, which is actually called as analog ballast. If I say 0, it is 0. If I say 10 volt, it is actually 100%. So whenever I do dimming, so your value range will actually vary from 0 to 10, right? And most of the standard dimming ballast or the drivers what available in the market is, you will, if you just ask for a dimmable ballast or the driver, so they'll always suggest you 1 to 10 volt, right? Because most of the times we'll give customer to supply the ballast or the lighting loads based on their own preference. So in that time, we definitely need to highlight them. You should have a 0 to 10 volt ballast, not 1 to 10 volt ballast. If at all, if I'm taking a 1 to 10 volt ballast, I should have my dimmers which supports relay, which means once it reaches to 1%, it should actually cut off the power, right? So my 0 to 10 volt dimmer, once it reaches to 1, what happens is it'll actually cut off the relay, the power which is going to the ballast, right? So then if I turn it on, so again it'll turn it on, then it'll actually start dimming it. So that becomes, even I can use my 1 to 10 volt ballast also, but with the relay trigger which is built into my device itself. Right. So apart from 0 to 10 volt, so there are digital dimming options like DALI and DMX, right? So a small bit about DALI and DMX. Definitely we talked about all these things in bit deeper, bit in the basics, but again I'm recollecting it. So instead of ballast and the driver, so they name it as a digital module, which is again a ballast or the dimmer, but it works on a digital technology. So either it is a DALI or DSI. So your 0 to 10 volt dimmers definitely will not work on any of the digital solutions, right? And you need to have a DALI control device or a DSI device. So maybe if it is a DALI, so in Control4 we have KNX DALI module, we can integrate it with that. Or any third-party DALI module we can actually integrate with it. We don't have direct DALI integration module which is available. And then of course for the DSI also you should be using any of the third-party modules to integrate it. or even for the DMX, so you should have the third-party engine to integrate it. So it is not actually the direct solutions we have directly to integrate with any of these options. We talked about it again. Right. Okay. So this is actually the dimming technology basics and the load basics we talked earlier. So definitely about the lighting solutions. We have the wide range of lighting solutions in Control4. So which actually we have the Zigbee option, which is wireless lighting solutions, what we call it as, mainly for small retrofits or maybe where you don't have the feasibility to run more cables or do a lot of modifications on the wiring. And then we have a centralized solution, so where you can actually plan it from the initial, so where you are going for a major rework or maybe the full design or maybe the projects from initial solution. So in that case, you can actually go for a centralized lighting option. And of course, people are technology pros in sometimes cases. What happens? People know about KNX and other technologies. So if you have any solutions on KNX lighting, so we have the KNX lighting products, which means from all the categories. Like we have about 120 SKUs on the KNX lighting categories itself. And I'm not going to talk about KNX lighting in general in the basics about the products, because before that, if you know the basics of, if you know about the, if you are a KNX guy, definitely you will know what all products ranges we have. So I'm not going to talk about all the KNX lighting in general here, but I'll be talking about the wireless and the centralized lighting solutions by the Control4, right? So definitely, so you don't say your keypads as a switch. Okay, so it is no more a switch, right? So when you do automation, when you do smart homes, when you do integrate all the things, so none of your keypads, none of your switches are no more as switches. It is actually called as a keypad, right? Why we say it is a keypad? So you are not actually going to control one lights in any of your projects or any of your smart home projects. What you will actually do is you will create a scene, right? So where it will combine group of loads together. So that is the reason people always don't say as a device name. So like I'll not say as like a particular load name. I'll see a mood, which means I'll say it is a music time or maybe it is a party time. So whatever the scenes I'm creating, so I'm just going to recall that scene. So that is why we always say it is a keypad, right? So it is not just like the lighting device, right? And moreover, you can program it to control all your other actions as well, maybe your audio, video, or maybe security, and even you can program your LED status. Like when any of my room is on, I can have a green LEDs, or all my rooms are off, I can program it to make it a red LED so that I'm aware that all my devices are turned off. I can go to sleep. So which means it is more like an intuitive device, not like a touchscreen, but it can do almost all the actions whatever I'm actually going to program it. Right. So what are we going to talk about here? So the first one is your wireless lighting. So what are the products we have? What are the things we can do with the wireless lighting? And then of course the centralized lighting. And then we're going to talk about the distributor lighting, the same panelized, how the distributor lighting works. And then of course the hybrid solution, where you can combine panelized and wireless lighting together. Right. So I'm jumping into the wireless lighting solution to start with first. Right. So as I said, all my controllers are Zigbee capability enabled, so I can integrate, which means I can add in all my Zigbee devices in the projects, right? Like we have wireless lighting devices, keypads, or maybe the extension modules, or maybe the wireless motion sensor, or maybe a third-party locks, third-party devices which support Zigbee, like a curtain motors. So if we have the Zigbee version of the curtain motors, so that can be actually integrated with Control4. So and even EL as the locks, which works on Zigbee. So without adding any of the external additional devices, maybe transmitter receiver, we can use the existing Zigbee environment to communicate with those devices, right? So this will give you more flexibility on the Zigbee. So that's what it's actually all about. And advantage of Zigbee lighting. So you really don't have to worry much about the wiring in generally, because I can try to convert my existing wiring into my Zigbee range, which means I can make it into smart. So that is what the major advantage with your wireless lighting solutions, right? And I can integrate, and even I don't have to run a cable for like motion sensor or maybe door lock contacts. I can just put in my any of the wireless devices, which is battery operated, just like a plug and play. I'll just plug it and I can actually program it to do any of the actions, right? So that becomes more viable options in a lot of retrofits, other the smaller retrofit categories projects. Right. So when it becomes wireless solution, a small layout which actually says about what is actually wireless is all about. So it is actually your typical lighting layout, which means whether I'll go for a normal wiring and I'll just add my wireless lighting module in between. So every lighting circuits which goes from your electrical DB and go to all your lighting switches location, and you'll just replace your existing switches with the Control4 wireless lighting solutions, right? So that is how it normally works in, right? So before we talk about the products, the advantages of the Control4 Zigbee lighting products in deeper. Okay, so I can use a normal standard lighting into a smart light, which means a switching or dimming, right? So based on your lighting capability. And even I can use the keypads, right? So I can use the first button to control the lights. Other button can be programmed as to my audio, video, security, any of the actions from the keypad itself. And it works on a standard wireless communication. So you can utilize your existing wiring itself with smaller modifications. You really don't have to go into major changes. And it supports almost most of the loads based on the loads actually. So your LEDs or incandescent or ELV, because it all the dimmers modules actually we call it as a adaptive phase dimming modules. It can adapt it to forward and the reverse phase, and all my switching modules can handle the loads up to 5 amperes. So you really don't have to worry about what is the load, but only thing is you need to check whether it is a dimmable load. That's what it is all about, right? And also all my dimmers actually auto detects the load what is you are connecting in. So maybe if I'm connecting a forward phase, it will say it is a forward phase. I'll show you a screen where you can actually see as whether it is forward or the reverse phase, because most of the times it becomes like most of your dimmers does not mention what is the dimming technology it normally uses. Okay, but in generally in India, so we don't actually get forward phase devices, but in very rare cases, almost like 1 or 2% cases, you might be seeing a forward phase loads, right? And you can see whether it is a forward phase or the reverse phase by itself, because in some cases, if I combine forward and the reverse phase in a single circuit, definitely you will have issues with your dimmer module, right? Or even if I'm connecting any non-dimmable loads into my dimmer, it'll definitely show you as a device which cannot support. So which means it is easy for me to know that whether it can work or not, right? And all my dimmers and the switching modules, it actually have the protection circuitry by itself. So which means if I connect it by miss anything wrong, if it goes in, I can actually uh, detect. It can easily show you from the indication itself. It will actually start blinking red so that you are sure that my device is not went wrong, right? So you can just need to reconnect it back and then it's fine. So it's all gonna work back, right? And all these devices will actually monitor what is the wattage it is consuming, what is the current it is taking in, so everything easily seen. And in case if I'm not using the device, which means if I'm putting a dimmer, my dimmer, if I'm not using the dimmer, so I just turned off the light, in that case, in the ideal scenario, it just consumes only 5 watts per a dimmer. So it's very lesser than that. So 5 watt is actually the maximum. So identical scenarios, if you're not using any keys, any LEDs, nothing it is there, it will just consume only 1 watt. So if I'm using a LED behavior, which means the LED feedback, so then it will actually show you as a 5 watts. If you're not at all using it, it just as a blank keys if you're using it, so it will just consume only 1 watt. So that is what the operation, which means the identical power consumption of the device. And this energy can be checked by the dealers, or even they can send an email notification saying that this is what today's energy consumption, or maybe weekly, all those things can be emailed to customer, but definitely they cannot actually see it in the user interface. There is a different way to do it actually, right? So what are the other things which can actually do? So it gives you a combination of 7 button combination, which means 5 buttons plus up and down, which makes it 7. And all these have the possible configuration, like you can program it to press, which means a push release, which means single tap, double tap, dribble tap. And also you can program it to do something called press and hold. Maybe if I press and hold it for 5 seconds, do certain actions. If I press and hold it for 10 seconds, do other actions. So it gives you full flexible programming options for any of the dealers, any of the customer demands basically, right? And so maybe today you are putting certain buttons, your customer don't like it, if they wanted to change it to some other buttons, so it just swap, you just need to change the buttons, that's the you can feel replaceable. And you can do custom engraving also. So all this engraving will have the backlit which can actually glow and say that what is the text you are actually engraved in, right? So that will give you a full flexibility of the actual names, what you wanted to match it with your your rooms or your scenes, right? So it is actually customer faced option, so customer can define their names. So by default, we will send you the blank one. So once you are set, once you've done your installation, your customer will feedback you back with what is actually they needed. And so we do have the backlit for that engraving, so it can be programmable with color control, and it's easy. And also you can adjust to daylight level as well. And all the LEDs on the side, if you see, there are like small dots which is there. So that is actually the LED feedback lights. So whether it can show, you can program it to do active inactive status, you can program it to change any colors, any of these things are possible. So it's all RGB, so which means you can have entire color pattern scenario, whatever you wanted to program it. And before I talk about the last one is the ambient sensor in the device. So all these devices comes with the ambient sensor built in. So I can program it to, like, whenever my room goes into certain level, so I wanted to my backlight to be on, or if it goes fully off, I can turn it off. So it will give you full flexible options. And this is common for wired or maybe wireless, any of the lighting devices from Control4. Right. And when it comes to dimmers, so you have the entire property configurations, maybe in the software. So you'll have the preset level, you can define the ramp rate, you can define the whole ramp rate, and you can define the dimming range. Maybe if I have a dimmer which does not work from 1 to 100, I can adjust it to, like, I can adjust to 20 to 40, so whatever the dimming range is. Based on that, it'll actually auto adjust in your composer, and it'll say when your light starts, it'll start from 20, and then it goes to the certain range, and then it goes to 100. So you can actually play around with the entire configurations, right? And we do support the cold start value as well. So maybe some of the driver based devices, if it does not start from 0, it needs a power to turn on, so you can actually give the power as well. So for example, my cold start value, I wanted to give it as 100 milliseconds. I wanted to give 100%, so you can give 100 milliseconds to 100%. So then once it turns on, which means the driver turns on, then you can define the lighting defining range. So that will give you full flexibility on the lighting as well. Sorry. Right. So the next thing is, of course, I ask the advanced properties also, which means where I can see the fault detections, which means whether your circuit is okay, or if it is detecting the load, or if it is not detecting the load, what is the forward phase or the reverse phase. You can actually see it from the dimming mode itself. And you can define the ambient light properties, which means your dark room, dim room, bright room. What is dark room, what is dim room, what is bright room. It will give you the entire range configuration, which means it will 0 to 255 flexible scale. You can define it, what is your dim room, dark room, everything by yourself from fully selected option. And so that gives you a full customization of the loads. So, and also the LED behavior of the lighting devices. So that gives a full flexibility, right? And making a 3-way or 4-way or any of the way, which means from any buttons to any button, it's just like a connection. So you really virtual connection. So you really don't have to do any hard wiring or any hard programming. So you can do it. So maybe if I wanted to call my living room from other keypad, so I can just connect it from my composer. It's just gonna call it. So you're really not gonna do a programming or anything to do it, or even the LED behavior, even the backlight behavior, it actually all follows from the actual load from itself, right? And even for the lighting scenes as well, you can just create the lighting scene. You are just gonna bind it from the lighting scenes, so you're not actually don't have to worry about the LED programming or connection programming. So all these things are pretty much easy, right? So, and we have something called a single load and also the dual load devices. So single load devices, nothing but a single device can control a single circuit. A dual load devices which actually controls two circuits basically. So that is what actually the small representation what I'm actually showing here. So if I say dual load dimmer or dual load switch, it can, which means a single device can actually control two circuits. If it has a single zone devices, which will just control only the single load. So that is what the physical representation is, right? So that is actually the features of my lighting projects, right? So I'm just starting in the products, right? So to start with, we have a entire category, right? So we have a relay module, which means switching module, which you do on and off. And then of course we have adaptive phase dimmers, which can adapt it to any of the phase dimming. And then of course we have the analog dimmer, which is 0 to 10 volt dimmer. And then of course we have something called keypad dimmer, where you can have a keypad and also the lighting control together. And if you don't have any of the lighting solutions from the Control4, if If I don't have any of the Control4 lighting solutions, but still if I wanted to use the Control4 keypad to control anything, I can use a wireless keypad and I can program it to control third-party lighting or maybe lighting solutions or maybe audio video solutions, anything which is actually possible. And this is all Decora devices, right? And for the cases where they really don't have the space to show all the devices, they can actually use a puck modules where it can hide behind your back boxes or maybe the false ceiling. So it's actually about 1.5 inch thickness and 2x2 size. So if you have the space behind your back boxes, definitely most of the back boxes will not have that much space, but still you can actually put it in your false ceiling. Or if you can do back boxes which bit deeper, you can actually add. And the puck modules will give you flexibility to use your existing normal manual switch as well to control. And there is added advantage to it. So I'll talk about that also in a bit a minute. And this all actually comes in a Decora version, and for the Square version, which we call it as a UK module or maybe the Asian module versions, which is called as a Square devices. All these Square devices will actually have a single option. We have a single load version and also a dual load version. We have the switching module and also the adaptive phase dimming module. And all these devices can be flexible configurable keys where you can just wanted to control a load, you can just put it as a rocker button and you can just control the load. Or if you wanted to control it as a keypad, you can put it as a keypad module and you can just use it as a keypad. Maybe one button to call a scene, second button to control other actions. You can always, so it'll give you a full flexible configurable options. So that is what the entire product details about on the Square wireless lighting. Right, and some of the cases people will always say that I have the standalone motion sensor with lights connected, but I still wanted to make it into a smart home, which means I wanted to automate it into a smart home platform where I wanted to control it from my tab or anything. So maybe for the living room or the passage, if I'm integrating it, so I can program it like whenever it senses the motion, it plays some music, or maybe it turns on my room and make my room ready or anything. If I wanted to make it in that way, can I use my standalone sensor and lighting instead of putting your entire stuff? People may ask that kind of questions. For that kind of people's, definitely you can do it with the puck module. So if you're using a puck module with the standalone motion sensor, so definitely you can trigger the standalone motion sensor with the puck module as like your push buttons and other things, right? So it can trigger my loads also, right? And somebody asked whether I can control the dual load with the blind. So definitely you can do it if it within a range, if a cut motor is within a range of 5 amperes. If it is more than that, definitely you cannot. Right, and all these Square devices, which means on the UK versions, what we say is we'll just ship as a neutral device because you will have the entire flexibility to select the colors. We have about 12 colors, and for the face plates, we have about 16 face plate options where we have the metal finish, where we have the satin nickel finish, and also bronze version and the glass face plates. So it gives you a full flexibility on selecting the face plates and the keycaps. So you can select in any of the range as you wanted. All right. So that is actually the buttons on the face plates, the full range about my wireless lighting devices, right? And in the wireless categories, we do have a small wireless lighting devices, the plug and play kind of devices, as I said. So these are actually the battery operated devices where we have the motion sensor, door contact sensor, curtain motion sensor, or maybe the remote key fobs. It is very good for old peoples basically. So they can program like button 1, do certain actions, button 3, do some actions. So we have all those things. These are actually battery operated devices, which is available from Control4. And this is actually a third party product, which is actually nice, but it's again support Control4. And there are other products also which works on same Control4 Zigbee platform. So one of that is Yale. So they are there in with us for quite long time, time, almost all their biometric versions, most of the things which can be integrated with Control4 with the Zigbee module itself. And then next thing is Somfy, right? Somfy can be, they also have Zigbee versions. It has to be integrated, right? And so that is actually about the Zigbee of the Control4. There are a few more other partners also which is available. So I'm just talking about very few of them. And the next thing is keypad earthing. Yes, definitely you need to earth it. So we have the earthing connection also which is available. So now, so the next thing is Control4 and Z-Wave, right? So we also actually started something with Z-Wave, so which means it is, well, the reason is there is more adapting technologies, so there are more adapting products which is coming in Z-Wave also, and it is very much kind of go-to kind of, and a lot of low-end devices uses Z-Wave as a standard protocols. So we do integrate with Z-Wave as well, but with very limited options. At present, what you need to actually do is, so we have the Z-Wave access point separately, so we don't actually sell along with the controller if it is a Z-Wave requirement. So we do have the Z-Wave antenna which comes in. It comes in 3 different versions based on the region. So for North America, there is a different category, Canada, North America, and then of course European, there is a different categories, and then of course Asian and the Australian region, there are 3 different versions because of the frequency issues. Okay, so at present we do integrate with few of the products like AOTech, Baldwin. So if you see this, most of these products are very much common in US market range, right? And for our kind of regions, definitely we do integrate with the third-party modules, right? So if you have Vera or something which is integrated, you can integrate all those Z-Wave modules into Control4 platform. Or maybe there is a company called Flux Automation, so where they are actually working on a Control4 Z-Wave module, so they can integrate with almost any of the Z-Wave devices into their platform. So that's what they said. But the product is still in prototype, if I'm not wrong. So it is yet to come. So they're going to be launching it very soon. So with that, also you can integrate most of the Z-Wave products into Control4 platform, right? Other than that, so we don't directly talk to Z-Wave or any of the Z-Wave products directly. So we do keep on updating all our Z-Wave products as well. Like we are adding few of the third party from the European range as well. So we will be updating it all those very soon. But yes, we are going to integrate most of the Z-Wave products as well into our Control4 platform. Right. So that is actually the entire Z-Wave range. Again, I'm not going much deeper into the Z-Wave range because at present it is very limited to us. So most of the products which is not there, or maybe it has to be done from the third party. So definitely we'll have a third party knowledge better on the Z-Wave. So that is the reason I'm not touching more on the Z-Wave here. Right. So the next comes is panelized lighting from Control4, so wired lighting solutions. Right. So I'm just jumping in what is happening with this and panelized lighting. So in the panelized lighting, you can actually do this will be mainly for like a new project or maybe a major retrofit product projects where it can actually start from the scratch because you need to do kind of wiring changes in most of the cases, right? So how does it normally works? You will have an electrical DB, then from the electrical DB, you will have your automation lighting DB, lighting automation DB, then from the lighting DB, you will be connecting into all your lighting controllers. Okay, and so that is actually the option of the centralized lighting. This is we call it as a centralized lighting option, and then of course there is another term which is referred as a distributed lighting solution. What is this distributed lighting solutions? For example, if you have multiple electrical DBs, if you are putting multiple lighting DBs near to your lighting, which means you are segregating into multiple flows or multiple areas, so then you will put multiple automation DBs. That becomes distributed, but still it is a panelized lighting solution. So and so it depends on the case how you are actually gonna plan it up, how your site condition is, how the wiring is being done, if it is the existing case or maybe the new case, right? So you can have multiple options. Right, and so where I can use my centralized lighting solutions, it is all wiring solutions, so which means all your lighting modules need to be connected to the lighting actual modules in the centralized location. So we always say pull all your lighting circuits to the lighting DB, right? So that's where it actually comes in, right? So instead of your traditional, which means your traditional switching, it won't work in this case with any centralized lighting solution option. So which means it needs to be planned initially, or maybe it needs to be done most major retrofit, which means you will be running all our lighting wiring needs to be done. Right. So the product overview. So definitely I'm going to run through on the product side. So we have all the modules which is available in 8 channels, which means 8 channel adaptive phase dimmer, 8 channel 0 to 10 volt dimmer, 8 channel relay module. And also we have a wired keypad versions because if it is fully wired, so we have the option for a wired keypad also. So where people can put their wired keypad, but still the keypad function remains the same. So you'll have all those 838 function options, LEDs, backlight feedbacks, configuration. So everything gonna be as similar as your wireless lighting keypads or the wired lighting keypad. And there are lot of added advantage to it on the wired keypad also, right? So the next thing is deep dive into the projects, which means on the products. On the wired lighting solutions, so in centralized lighting solutions, one thing is we have multiple options for a failover. So because most of the times people will say that when I do automation, what happens if your controller is going offline, or what happens if your controller is rebooting, what happens if your controller is not working, what happens? So because they always, as a Control4, we always known as automation rather than lighting, right? So to make it more onto the lighting segment, so we have this failover mode option for all your panelized lighting devices. Either you can program all your wired program, if it is on network, you can program it to fallback. So which means it is automation independent. So I can call any scenes, whatever I actually created it from my wired keypad. Or the next thing is I can actually do a remote override. So which means I can physically run a cable from my automation device, which means the HNL dimmer, and I can turn it on, turn it off with the manual switch as well. Or even I can approach the module and control it. So here the best option, what I will always love it. So the main thing is failover, which means the pre-programmed your wired keypad, right? So if I'm running a project with the panelized module, and if I'm running a project with a wired keypad, I can always program a failover mode. So that becomes more easy. And so that becomes more easy for me to control my loads in some cases if my controller is failed, or maybe if I'm replacing or anything, if I'm doing any changes on my controller. Right. So on the product side, so the first one is adaptive phase dimmer. So all these modules will have two lines, which is actually from the same phase. Don't consider it as a two different phase. Okay, so uh, but you can do two line in, which means you can have two dB line in. So it can be two different circuit breaker, two line you can feed in, but it has to be from the same phase. And it support up to 277 watts, 240 watts, and you have the voltage rating, everything which is mentioned here. And all this module will have also have a Ethernet loop through, which means if I just give the one input, I can take the second output and connect it to the other HNL dimmer as well. So I'll just gonna show about that in a minute. And also the voltage capacity. So if it is a normal incandescent load, so it can actually take up to about 6,000 watts if you are actually giving two different line in. Or if you are not running two lines, if I'm just looping through one line to the other line, so the maximum wattage we say is still 3,840 watts, right? That is what the maximum it can handle. But based on your load type, so if it is a LED, there is a different range. If it is incandescent, there is a different wattage. So based on your wattage type, definitely it will actually have the different impact on your lighting circuits on the dimming modules. On the 0 to 10 volts, so this is actually mainly for analog dimming. So again, it comes in a 8-channel version, right? And maximum it can handle up to 100 milliampere current sink, because when I talk about the ballast or the drivers, it always comes with the current sink, not the wattage basically, because I'm not going to directly control the load. So I'm going to control the devices which control the loads, which means either it is a ballast or maybe the drivers, right? So based on that current sink, so we'll be controlling it. And for the devices, maybe if I'm using a 1 to 10 volt ballast, we have a external relay trigger. So there is a potential free contact available. So I can use that potential free relay and connect it to any of the external relay which can trigger the 240 volt. And maybe once it reaches to 1 watt, I can trigger that to turn it off. So that is quite common way to use it with the 0 to 10 volt dimmer, right? So that's my adaptive phase dimmer. So all these are 8-channel modules, definitely yes. And the next thing is relay module. So which means mainly used for on-off circuits, maybe the curtains, which means the AC operated curtains, which means because you will have multiple options for the controlling the shades, right? Shades or the curtains. Right, so you have a DC option, you have a AC option, where you have the Zigbee option, Z-Wave option. There is multiple options, but yes. So if it is a AC motor version, so definitely you can connect it to my 8-channel relay, and I can program it to act as a one of the relay to be active at the time. I can connect it to a curtain, and even I can connect it to and control it from the module itself. And all my lighting relay modules, which means on-off circuits, I can connect it to my relay. So again, but it takes actually 4 lines, which means from a single phase, but you can connect it from a 4 different circuit breaker. So which means it will give you each one, everyone can handle up to 16 amperes. But if I'm giving only one line output or line input, so then that is actually the maximum input what you can actually take it as output. So which means it can handle only 16 amperes in all the 8 channel. But if I'm segregating and connecting it as a 4 different 16 ampere input, so then definitely I can actually take it as a 4 different 16 amperes output combined together. So that is my relay module, which can handles up to 8 different circuits. Right. So this is actually the module overviews. A small representation of how does it gonna look like. And someone wanted to highlight something. Yes, Suman.
So every relay is double rated. It's up to 16 amperes, so that you can connect one relay output as to 15 ampere and the second relay at 1 ampere also. So that's the only point I want to make.
Thank you for adding. Right. Okay, so this is how your normal panelized or maybe a centralized lighting solutions will normally look like. So where we will have a DB, from the DB it is connected to the terminal blocks, then to the terminal blocks to the module, then from the module to each and every circuits. Right. So we talked about more in detail previously on this wiring and other things. So definitely I'm not going to take much time on this basically. And we do have our terminal blocks as well for the modules. And why we talk about terminal blocks? Before I talk about the terminal blocks, I'll talk about the wired keypads, and I'll talk a bit on about terminal block a bit later. Right. So we have the wired keypad version. So wired keypads, we have the 48 volt supply, which means for keypads, and you can plan it in a way that it works with your wired lighting solutions and wired keypads. And to make this work, so definitely you will be using it along with your bus Ethernet gateway. So this bus Ethernet gateway works on a star topology, so which means wired communication RS485. So, and I can have up to 1,000 feet, which means 330 feet. And from a, so this is how your normal scenario working will look like. So you'll have a bus Ethernet gateway and then bus power supply. Then from the bus power supply, you will be connecting it to the gateway, and then from the gateway you will be connecting it to your wired keypad, and it supports daisy chain and it works on star topology. So all these things are pretty much possible, right? Just give me a moment. Sorry for the interruption. Right. Okay, so bus Ethernet gateway and then bus power supply, and then of course you can loop it through the keypads as it works on a daisy chain, and you can have multiple spokes as it supports star topology as well, and maximum it can support up to 40 keypads per gateway. And in case if I wanted to use it with another some certain keypads, manual keypads, if it is the push buttons or any fancy keypads, of course I can do it with the input module, which is called as a DCIM. It's again a wired option. So that's my wired keypad, and of course the product overview. We do have the panels, but definitely it won't work here, which means it becomes more expensive to edit into our region. But we do sell this if at all. Yes, we have multiple options like 2 channels and 5 channel options. And then the terminal block. So we always say if you're not at all using Control4 terminal block, that is well and good, fine. But definitely you should use a terminal block in any of your projects. Don't directly feed in everything to your module. Definitely that will spoil your entire wiring and entire look of your installation. So, and also it will be very much difficult to troubleshoot it basically. So always connect it into the terminal block and then to the module. So that is always a recommendation. And some of the key points. Okay, so because don't put too many devices on your wall, so that will become more like a keypad jungle rather than your actual keypad, and what you will definitely not know what is the function you really wanted to do. So that will become more complications, right? And also use your lighting devices as not only just to control the lights. Okay, so that is what it normally happens if I am going for only the lighting automation products, right? You can program it as like a single button to do multiple actions. Either it is audio, video, or maybe your security systems to armed, or maybe turn off all your lights, close your curtains, control your ACs, maybe check your garage door status. So it's actually a combined programmed event. So that is what it has to be as an automation solution. Right, and the key points, as I was telling about, so all these HNL modules, it actually comes with a screw-free, wire-free installation friendly. So we say it as a new look connect input terminal. So you just need to plug in. So you just get logged in. And also we have the network pass-through, which means you can connect it as an input, and then next output I can take it as and connect it to other modules. So that is actually another great option. And we have adjusted our DIN rail module, which can go into most of the widely available DIN rail mounting options, where it can universally. So it can go with to any DIN rail mounting modules. Right. And the next thing is when I talk about the wired keypad, so people will ask about the cabling infrastructure for the wired keypad, right? So on the wired keypad section, so we use the standard same RS-485 communication cables like how the KNX uses or maybe Lutron uses. We recommend a pair of 18 American wire gauge and a pair of 22 American wire gauge, 22 American wire gauge for data and a pair of 18 American wire gauge for power to the device. We don't recommend Cat6 or Cat5e cables. So the main reason is Cat6 or Cat5e cables. If you go beyond more than 20 keypads per gateway, so definitely there is a lag in it. So it is not actually more lag, but yeah, there is a lag. So, but still, if you are having a project which is using a Cat6, so definitely there is a wiring guide for it. Actually, you should follow that kind of wiring. So don't just put any pair, like 4 pairs, and make it as a wired keypad. So that will definitely cause you issue. Right. Then the next thing is wiring topology, as I was telling you. So bus Ethernet gateway supports star topology, so you can have multiple connections, and it can be daisy chained. You can have multiple gateways, multiple keypads connected as a star topology. Right, and then of course we support up to 40 keypads, and maximum distance, which is about 300 meters, 1000 feet either way. Right, and so that actually concludes most of our centralized and distributed lighting options. Okay, the concept remains the same, either it is the distributed or either it is the centralized lighting solutions. The only thing is how the wiring has been done in the in your site, or how the wiring has been planned by the electrician. So based on that, you need to actually get into integrate. Um and maybe if you wanted to plan it as a hybrid, so definitely you can plan it in that way as well. So what is hybrid is where you will have the centralized lighting solution as well, and also a wireless lighting solution as well, a combination. Certain circuits will be handled as a wireless and certain circuit will be handled as a wired. So any combination. So even that also can be pretty much possible. But yes, as I told you, so this is not just your recommendation, or this will definitely not gonna be in our way. So it really depends on the site condition, how it has been wiring has been done, and how it is easy for the electrician to do the wiring. If it is centralized lighting itself, some of the electrician will say that I never done it, I'll not be doing it. Okay, so that's where the problem comes in. So if they are very much, if you have the detailed documentation can be helped with your integrator, which means your electrician, definitely they can plan it in any ways. Right, and some of the highlights about the Control4 lighting solutions. Right, the RS485 bus is not actually open to all the third-party devices. It is only for Control4 wired keypads. Okay, so if it is a third-party RS485 keypad, we can directly integrate with the controller itself. We'll talk about that bit in later. Right, and the next thing is snapshot. So what is this snapshot? For example, I have created certain scene for a movie. So I'm watching a movie. I'm created a certain scene to turn on, say, whatever the things I wanted. I just wanted to go out for a break for 10 minutes, right? So I can stop this snapshot. I can take the snapshot, which means controller will actually take what is the room, what is the action it needs to be selected. And then if I goes and comes back, and if I recall the snapshot, it'll actually turn on the same scene, right? So maybe this is actually, we call it as a snapshot mode, or maybe if I'm watching a movie, or maybe I'm watching a sport channel and I'm going back and I just start my snapshot, and then maybe my wife comes in, she watches whatever she wanted, or maybe then my son comes in, he wanted to watch whatever he wanted. So once they done all those things, then after that, when they went maybe evening, so if I'm again coming back and if I recall the snapshot, it will just recall the same scene what I created for myself, like maybe on the curtain range or maybe the AC percentage, your lighting percentage, and what is your favorite channels what you are watching in. So this will be like a great tool to actually give some different fact for the automation. And
Basically, this is kind of application that's been used in a party mode. For example, you're trying to party with different intensities, or for example, you have set lights at 10%, 20%, 30%. All this you need not set it again and again. So we have a snapshot wherein it will capture the scene at that particular event and recreate the scene whenever you want it for you. That's it.
right, Dishant, we will discuss with you personally with your team. No worries. Right. So the next thing is occupancy. Right. So this is actually another great thing, great tool, which is actually called as like if you enable this occupancy, what will actually happen is it will record. You can select it whatever you wanted, like lights, audio, video, blinds, AC, everything, and you can record all your actions, maybe for a week or a day or maybe a hour, and then again maybe if I'm recording for this my whole week, then if I'm not there in my whole week, my entire family is going on vacation, but I just wanted to pretend my home like somebody is there, which means every rotation action is keep on happening. So this will be a great tool, like I can just recall that occupancy, and this will actually call the occupancy, which means all the actions again. So which means whatever you're doing from Monday to Sunday, the same action will happen from Monday to Sunday, even if you're not there in your home. Okay, and this is mainly great tool for your lights, because you want to turn off, turn on your lights routinely, so all those things and all you'll be doing. So this will be recording the entire actions. Okay, so that is what we call it as a occupancy. This is like acting in a, it is just like your controller will be acting like you are in a home. So that is what the occupancy is all about. Right. That's my entire lighting product and also the Zigbee overview. And before we conclude, a small final review on the entire sessions. So the first thing is on any lighting projects, definitely will be the lighting plan. And the next thing is you will be working on what is the load, what is the rooms, what is the locations, how many lighting loads, how many keypads, what is the wattage, everything you need to be planning it with the schedule. And then definitely your load types. What is the load types they're going to install? And also whether it's going to be a dimmable and non-dimmable, or whether it's going to be relay connected, and all those things you need to be designed. And then you need to consider your plug points as well. So if you are fully planning it up, even the motorized curtains or maybe screens, relays, even curtains, all those things will come in that time itself. Even if it is a split ACs, you need to consider about the split AC power points, all those things. And based on that, definitely you'll be working on the solutions. So circuits and dimmable, whether it's going to be a wired option or a hybrid option or a distributed option, and then also your keypad locations, how it's going to fit in. The one thing I wanted to stress about the keypad location is always go for the standards, right? So bedside, you don't put it in the 5 feet height. Okay, so maybe in a room, if you're entering, if you're putting in a 5 feet, that is fine. So in bedside, if you don't put it in 5 feet, right? So plan it initially, do the actions accordingly. So that will really be a helpful options for any of your lighting projects. And then next thing is your load schedule and the wiring design. Yeah, this comes after your other things like commercial stuffs. So you'll be working on what is the actual plan of your project. So how does it gonna be connected? And once, of course, once all these things have been done, so definitely all the things are like your be actual execution. So have your modules connected, have your terminal blocks connected, have your wiring connected. So when you do the wiring, you always ensure that don't give power and connect it to everything. So that will definitely screw up your wiring and your module, because in any of your lighting projects, okay, so your failure rate will be very, very higher during the installation period. Maybe in 1 or 2 months, so you will see a lot of issues, right? So that the main reason is the power is not fully up. So you are trying to get everything gettled and everything gets sorted. And even your customer also will demand that lighting has to be a first priority rather than the other things, right? So plan it correctly and test it with the manual switch or something, and then you take it into automation. Don't directly blindly connect it. And also on the lighting, previously I said the documentation is very much important, right? So always go for the documentation, have all your loads, wattages, everything connected, plan it correctly, do the connections, and always go from like a ground and then neutral and then phase connection and then load connections. And once you've done all your physical installation, then of course comes to your software part. So this is actually the basic scenario of any of your lighting projects. Okay, so definitely I might be going wrong here and there somewhere. So just this is actually based on my best practice, whatever I have been observing. And on the panel installation, always follow the installation instruction which is actually mentioned on any of your modules. You really don't have to read all the manuals, but definitely check the warnings and the connection details. So that will be like a important thing. And few of the things to be considered. So once you add your dimmer module, so you need to set your dimmer module wattage because it supports all the range from 1T to 277. So if it is a 240, you set 240 volt. And then ours is 240 volt, not 230 volt, right? So you set in 240 volt. Okay, so if you measure our voltage, it will be more than 240, 242 in sometimes it will be in 238 range. So 230 to 242 is actually our normal range. And the frequency, so set the frequency correctly. And also it will show all your module status, right? So whether the temperature, whether it is overload or whether like override is on. So all the details will be there in your dimmer modules. So that is actually very much important for any modules. And then of course your connections between the loads. So definitely we'll be adding multiple loads into the project. So a few things to configure: your cold start value, a minimum on off level, and then of course if you wanted to adjust your ramp rate. And at last you will be it will be showing energy information, which means how much time it is on, what is the current consumption it is, how much energy it is used. So this will be per circuit. And you can actually have these things to be mailed or notified maybe via programming or other things, but it won't be showing in your on-screen navigator, right? And naming your lighting circuits, so that is very much important. And also you can actually have the load schedule also, which can be matched with your lighting design, so you can do that as well. And watts, so what is the wattage of my circuit? So that is actually again a definition, you need to define it. So once you've done these basic things on your composer properly, so this will be the same physical representation of what is your plan, what you are actually initially designed. Okay, so your load number, your wattage, your connections, your circuit details, so that gonna actually match it with your physical connection. So once you're done, your project is ready. And of course, you can verify from the composer itself. There is a tool called panelized lighting tool. So where it actually gonna create an entire report for your panels, what is the module installed, what is the MAC ID of the module, and also what is the load connected, and also whether it is ArcFAT enabled, the load names, watts. So it'll have the entire detail which can be seen it from your report. So even it will give you the load schedule as well. All right. So this will actually need to match it with your physical manual. So which means actually your initial planning, what you are actually doing. So this has to be done. So that is where it makes it more easy. So for the dealers who are already doing the panelized lighting, so you can actually refer it from tools and reports. So that is where it actually comes in. So this will come only for the panelized lighting models. For the wireless lighting, so it becomes more like a hybrid solution, more like a decentralized solution. So it will be there in each and every module itself. So this will not actually create in your wireless lighting module. Right. So that's my entire lighting products overview, and the products and the modules and the applications and all those options. And that should be giving a brief knowledge about the Control4 lighting solutions, what we offer and what is it can be, what and all it can be done from the Control4 lighting solutions. And the last thing is, most of the times people will ask whether I should go for wired or wireless, right? Definitely it is not me decides or it is not you decides. It depends on your site, it depends on your wiring, and depends on your design. And in some cases your wireless is makes very much sense. Wireless will be very much advantage, where will have a lot of advantages over the wired. And if it is a small or the medium sized project, if it is a big project, if it is a huge project where the customer really don't want much keypads, they wanted one keypad just on the main side, in that case your panelized, which means the centralized lighting solutions will help. And in some case, customer will look for like a hybrid kind of option. They'll say, even if the module fails, what should I do? Definitely, if the module fails, definitely the lighting will not work, right? So it depends on your interaction between your customers and interaction between your site conditions, right? So number of circuits, cabling, keypads, all those things. So based on that, it will actually be considered, right? So that is what the lighting fundamentals is. That is how it normally works, right? So and this actually concludes our session. And again, thank you for everyone, whoever is